Hello there. Welcome back to my tiny corner of the internet. Sit back, relax, and follow along as I share some of the random games that I play and things that I do. On today's fun-filled episode, watch in amusement as this rural old person experiences character creation in Twilight 2000, the first edition. So yeah, welcome back. As you can see here, I've already got everything laid out that you're going to need to create a character using the first edition rules for Twilight 2000. You're going to need a pencil. You're going to need some blank copies of your character generation worksheet. So you're either going to photocopy the one that came with your set or print one off the internet. You're going to need 4d6, you're going to need 2d10, and a scientific calculator to help you figure out the math on all the formulas. I'm actually kidding. You don't need a scientific calculator. You certainly can use a calculator to help you figure out some of the formulas and whatnot, but no, you don't need a scientific calculator. I'm just kidding. It's not that complex. All right. So, as you'll notice, just right off the bat, there are some shaded areas on this generation worksheet. Anything that you write down in those areas does not transfer to your character sheet. And conversely, anything that is in a non-shaded area will transfer over directly. Now, I have not printed out a character sheet to show you how this all transfers over. It's pretty simple. Everything that's listed on this sheet that is not shaded will be listed on the character sheet somewhere. You just find it and transfer the number or the information to the correct space. The real reason, though, that I don't have a character sheet is because I generate all mine in Excel. So everything you see here, I've already put into Excel, and based on either a random number generator or a physical dice roll, I can build a character pretty quickly. And you could do the same if you're comfortable with Excel or Google Sheets, something like that. But for our video today, we're going to kick it old school and go with pencil and paper. All right, so let's get right to it. Let's see what we've got. All right, step one, we need to figure out our basic attributes. And to do that, we roll 4d6 and subtract 4 from the total. Any result of a 0, we just re-roll. And we can favor or slight an attribute in pairs before we roll. What that means is if you favor an attribute, say we favor fitness, we would write an F here. But now that means we have to slight a different attribute. So let's say we slight agility. Once we know that we're favoring or slighting that attribute, we will modify the result to become closer to 20 or closer to 1. Based on whether it's favored or slighted. You cannot favor and slight the same attribute, and they have to be done in pairs. So the most you can do is 3 pairs. That means you're favoring half of your attributes and you're slighting the remainder. I don't use it myself, but you may find that you want to. Now I'll give you an example of how that works. So continuing with our first example, say we were favoring fitness and slighting agility. We would write favored for fitness. Our roll, we rolled 4d6, we subtract 4, we have an 11. Because it was favored, we now need to find the midpoint in between our roll and 20. Because 20 is the highest the stat can be. So 20 minus 11 is 9. 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. Now, if you're favoring an attribute, you round any resulting fractions down. So that 4.5 becomes a 4. We add 4 to our roll of 11 for a final adjusted fitness attribute of 15. Now, because we favored fitness, we had to slight agility. So if we use this exact same roll, just as the example, we would have an S for sliding agility. Our roll is 11. Now we need to find the midpoint in between 11 and 1, with 1 being the lowest score an attribute can have. So 11 minus 1 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we subtract 5 from 11, which would give us a final adjusted agility attribute result of 6. Now, when we favored the attribute, any resulting fractions we rounded down. If there are any remaining fractions when you're sliding an attribute, you would round that result up. And that is how favoring and sliding works. I don't use it myself unless you're trying to build a specific kind of character. In my experience, the best use of that is, say you want to favor like your fitness and your constitution and your stature, which means you're going to slight your agility, your intelligence, and your education. But that is going to give you a very beefy character. They're going to be able to take a lot of damage before they go down. So if you're looking for a meat shield, that's the way to go about it. So yeah, let's jump right in, see what we get. All right, so we have a 13 fitness. We have a 13 agility. Yeah, I have to re-roll that one. Didn't go through the chute. So I guess that turned out pretty good. So 19 minus 4 is 15. That's a 10. Our intelligence is a 10. And our education is an 8. All right, so those are our stats. Depending on what games you may have played prior, there's really no, there is no correlation between your attributes and your skills. So if you've got really bad results in any attribute, don't worry, it's not going to impact your skills at all. And there aren't a whole lot of times when you need to make an attribute check in the game. So that's also kind of a blessing. The ones that do tend to come up the most are constitution checks, but depending on what exactly it is your character's trying to do, your referee may call for, an agility check if you're trying to jump across a trench or, something like that. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's mostly constitution checks that will come into play, and that's later under your hit capacity, which we are almost to. But moving on, next step is total. We need to find the total of our stats. So we've got a 13 and a 13 is 26, and 15 is 41, 51, 61, 69. Nice. All right, so we've now come to our first formula, and we need to find our strength attribute. To do that, we find our fitness attribute, which is 13, and our stature attribute, which is 10. So 13 plus 10 is 23. We divide that by 2. 23 divided by 2 is 11 and a half. But because the number is underneath, or the line is underneath the formula, we round that down to an 11. Had the line been above the formula, we would round that up to a 13. Hit capacity. This is essentially our hit points. And as we mentioned before, constitution plays a big part in your hit capacity. It's every body part. So having a good con is usually a good thing. Hit capacity for our head is equal to our con score, so that's 15. Chest is equal to our strength plus our constitution plus our stature. So strength is 11, constitution is 15, that's 26, stature is 10, so that's 36. All other areas of the body have constitution plus stature, so 15 plus 10 is 25. Now these are not absolute values in that you can only take 15 points of damage to your head, for example. What these numbers represent is the amount of damage you can take before you suffer a serious wound to that area of your body. So for example, if I took 10 points of damage to my head, it's only considered a minor wound, and there are little, if any, gameplay adjustments. If you exceed your hit capacity, that is a serious wound. So, for example, say instead of suffering 10 points of damage, we were hit for 20 points of damage in our head. That is now a serious injury to our head. Because it's a serious injury, any part of your body that is seriously injured, you need to make a constitution check to remain conscious. If you fail that roll, you fall unconscious. Any amount of damage taken to any location on your body that equals or exceeds twice its hit capacity is a critical injury. So, for example, if we were hit in the head for 30 points of damage, that would be a critical injury to our head. Now, the game does state in the rules that any critical injury to the head is generally considered fatal. So, character's dead, roll a new one. A critical injury to any other part of your body will likely be fatal if you do not receive medical attention immediately. So right off the bat, you can see if you're going to try to do a single character solo playthrough, if you are injured or knocked unconscious, you're probably not going to survive. So it's very dangerous. Don't wander around World War III in Poland alone. All right. Next on our list is finding our throwing range, which is 2 times our strength score. That's an 11. 11 times 2 is 22. So we can throw a knife or hurl a grenade 22 meters. And that's one thing. In fact, I think every edition of Twilight 2000 uses the metric system. So things will be given in meters and liters, kilograms, kilometers, and so forth. If you want to convert these to imperial measurements, So, yards and gallons and feet and miles. You'll have to find those conversions yourself online. It's pretty easy. I just stick with metric system for simplicity's sake. Keeps everything streamlined. So weight. How much does our character weigh? We find that through this formula, which is 4 times our stature, which is 10. So 10 times 4 is 40, plus 40 is 80. So this character weighs 80 kilograms. Load is a measure of how much equipment we can carry before we are encumbered. And we determine that by multiplying our strength score times 2, so that would be 22. And then we add our constitution score to that. So 22 plus 15 is 36. We can carry 36 kilograms before we are encumbered. The effects of encumbrance are essentially it cuts your movement rate in half. And that's a terrible thing to have happen if you're in a firefight. You can't outrun enemy soldiers who are chasing you. You can't outrun packs of rabid animals that are trying to eat you. It's a bad thing to be encumbered in this game and trying to get away from danger. All right, step 8. We determine our military experience base, or MEB, using this formula. Now, MEB is roughly an indicator of how much stuff you've learned, knowledge, skills you've been exposed to, so on and so forth for your time in the military. And that formula is 120 minus your total, which we have as 69. Nice. That comes to 51. We now divide 51 by 7, and that result is 7.28, if my calculations are correct. No, it is not. Oh, I'm on the wrong. Yeah, this is why you have to double check your calculator before you start doing stuff. So 120 minus 69 equals 51 divided by 7 equals 7.28. However, the line is underneath the formula, so that rounds down to 7. How long we've been in combat is our time, and time is found by rolling a number of d6 equal to your MEB. So we know that's 7, so we're going to roll 7d6. So that's 12, 17. Rads, this is the amount of starting radiation we have for this character. It's determined the exact same way. So we roll a number of d6 equal to our MEB, which is 7. So on the rads roll, you want to roll low. That's not a good way to start off a low roll. So we have 17. It's 30. Okay. 30 starting rads it is. Over the course of gameplay, that number is probably going to do nothing but go up. It is the aftermath of World War III. There's a lot of impact craters. Nuclear fallout is essentially everywhere. So as you go through the game, that number is going to go up. Now, once it starts getting up into, I think, around like mid to high 70s is when you start having to check for the effects of radiation sickness. And it gets progressively worse the higher it goes from there. Coolness under fire. This is an important stat for any character to have. The way we determine that is this formula, which is 10 minus a 1d6 roll minus our time divided by 10, rounding any fractions down. So we know our time is 17. 17 divided by 10 is 1.7, but we round that down to 1. So 10 minus 1d6 minus 1 is essentially the same thing as saying 9 minus 1d6 is 9 minus 2 is 7. So we have a very bad coolness under fire. Generally, when it comes to cuff, coolness under fire, you want lower numbers. So 0s and 1s and 2s are good to have. 7s, 8s, 9s they're not good to have. Stuff in the middle, 4, 5, 6-ish, that's sort of average. So this character is not very cool under fire. So that means he's going to get rattled fairly easily. He's probably not going to get to do all the actions he wants to do in a combat round. He hesitates a lot, things like that. So it will eventually probably bite him in the butt, having a poor coolness under fire like that. But his one saving grace is that he is pretty beefy, so he's going to get shot a lot because he hesitates, but he can take the damage. Okay, our age is found by dividing our time by 12, rounding up. So 17 divided by 12 is a little bit over 1, but we round that up to 2. So 2 plus our education is 8, so that's 10 plus 8 is 18, plus a number determined by table 1. Table 1 is down here. Now our time, anything less than a 49 is just a 1, so that's 1d6. So we have 18 plus 1d6 years. That is 19. This guy is 19 years old. And that's kind of funny because he has been in combat for almost a year and a half. So he joined up basically, either right when he turned 18 or maybe even a little bit before. Maybe he got drafted or lied about his age or something. All right. So Army nationality is player's choice. I'm just going to stick with USA, and he'll be in the Army. You could pick whatever you want here, though. It doesn't even have to be a NATO army or nationality. You could be Russian, Bulgarian, Romanian, East German, whatever. Your native languages are determined by consulting the nationality and languages table, and that is found on your players charts. You flip that over. Boom. Here they are. So we already know we're American. That's up top. Our native language is English. So English. And what I do is I put an N in parentheses just to remind myself that that's my native language. You could also write 100 instead of N. That would just tell you speak English at rank, at fluency 100, which is essentially native speaker. But we see that there are other languages listed here under American, and they have percentile chances. So what that means is we roll percentile dice to see if we know those languages. I'm going to say that red comes first. So do we know Spanish? Oh, we do. Look at that, a 10. So we now add Spanish to our sheet, and I believe that is also at a fluency of 100. But let me double check the rules on that just to be certain. Language. Yes, it is. Characters of certain nationalities have a chance of having a second native language as well. So that would be an N or 100. Now, what these other languages mean is we would have had a chance to check for those if we hadn't already gotten Spanish. So essentially, you just go down the line until you get another one or you don't get one. If you do get one, in which case we did, you immediately stop rolling for any further languages. So because we now know Spanish, we don't get to roll for German, Italian, Polish, or Yiddish. So we'll set those dice to the side for now and move on. Are we an officer, yes or no? It is yes if our intelligence of 10 and education of 18, well, 10 plus 8 is 18, is greater than or equal to a 2d6 plus 16 roll. So essentially what this is telling us is the only way this character can be an officer is if they roll snake eyes. That is not snake eyes. So they are not an officer. Next, we determine our rank. And this, it starts to get a little squirrely here, so I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. Our rank number is found by dividing our time by 10 and rounding any fractions down. So 17 divided by 10 is 1.7, but that rounds down to 1. Plus n, and to find n, we roll 1d6 and consult table 2, which is right here. So we roll 1d6, and that's a 2. So that actually subtracts 1 from our result, which gives us an overall result of 0. Now this is where it gets squirrely, because to determine your actual rank, it says to consult table 2. You're like, well, we just did. There's no ranks there. What are you talking about? But actually what it's referring to is your player charts. And on the back, you see rank. Now, there's a die indicator here, 1 through 8. The way that it is described in the rules is that you use this number we've just found as 0 and find it on the chart. So there isn't a 0 under enlisted. Well, there isn't a 0 for officer either, because there isn't a 0. So what? We would be a private, I guess? The way I sometimes interpret it is because it's specifically asking for a die roll. You roll 1d6, that's a 1, and to that you add what you rolled here is 0. So we would be a specialist 4. It gets a little cloudy there, so ask your referee how you're going to do it before you get to this step, because they might have a different formula. All right, our specialty. We need to consult the specialty table and roll 2d6. Specialty table is found on the back of your player's charts, and that's this table right here. So the 2d6 roll is reflected right here. You need to meet or beat that number on a 2d6 roll in order to qualify for that specialty. Furthermore, if there is a attribute listed here, whichever attribute or attributes shows up, you have to have those at 12 or better. So as you can see, our Constitution is a 15. We easily qualify for anything that has Constitution. Our Intelligence, however, is only a 10. So anything that shows Intelligence, we don't qualify for, including Special Forces Intelligence Specialist, because that's only a 10, even though our Con was 15. We needed to have both of those at 12 or better. And our Strength is an 11, so we also would not qualify to be a cannon crewman. So, with that in mind, what do we want to do? You know what? This guy, you know what? He's going to try to be a Special Forces Weapons Specialist. So we need to roll an 8 or better on 2d6. And we got it. So he is Weapons Specialist, and he is Special Forces. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we got lucky and we qualified. If we had not rolled an 8, so say we had rolled a 6, we didn't qualify. You now need to pick another one to try for, but this roll is at -2. So let's say, well, we didn't qualify to be a weapons specialist. You know what? Let's try to be a ranger infantryman. So that's a 7. Ooh, we got a 3 minus 2 is a 1. So we did not qualify to be a ranger. Gosh, so what do we want to try to be? Let's try to be a ranger heavy weapons specialist. But this is now at -4. So that is 9 minus 4 is 5. So we don't even qualify for that. So you know what? Because this next roll is going to be at -6, let's just try to be an infantryman. See if we even qualify for that. 8 minus 6 is 2. No, we don't qualify for that. So our next roll is going to be at -8, because this is our 4th roll. And as you can see, 12 minus 8 is 4. The best we could roll is a 4, and there is nothing here. So that would mean we would only qualify for support services and to be a mechanic of one sort or an electronic specialist. So hopefully you get what you wanted on your first or second roll, because it steadily gets worse. Okay, the benefits of our specialty is also shown on this table. We know that we qualified for Special Forces Weapons Specialist. So our skill benefits are combat rifleman, heavy weapons, body combat, reconnaissance, and foraging, all for half cost. So that's pretty important to know. Now you can write that down in this spot, but usually what I do is I just transfer the skills over here, because I know I'm going to take those skills anyway, because I can get them for half cost. So combat rifleman, in fact, all these skills that are already listed on your character sheet, every character has those. That's what they start with. That's a reflection of your boot camp or your basic training and whatnot. Those aren't dependent on how good or bad you roll for stats, what your service branch and specialty are, what your nationality is. Everybody gets those. So I know that I get combat rifleman for half cost, so I'm just going to do a 1/2 there. We get heavy weapons for half. That's not listed, so I'm going to do heavy weapons half. We've got body combat for half. We've got reconnaissance for half, which is huge. All characters can benefit from reconnaissance. And then foraging for half. So that was our benefits of the specialty. Now we figure out our skill points. Skill points break down into 3 flavors. You have military skill points, education skill points, and background skill points. Now every character, regardless, starts with 300 background skill points. Military and education skill point totals will vary, however, based on these formulas from character to character. So in this case, our military skill points is found by multiplying our MEB by 40. So our MEB over here is 7. So that is 280 military skill points. Education skill points is our education attribute times 20. Education is 8. 8 times 20 is 160. So those are the total amounts of skill points that I have available within each area to increase skills for this character. Now, your skills are found on the front of your player's charts. Just right here, they're all listed. Well, if you recall from the unboxing video, there are 2 skills that aren't listed on here, but they are shown on the errata sheet. And that is tracked vehicle driver, the ability to drive tanks and half-track, stuff like that. Or wheeled vehicle driver, which is driving trucks and cars and buses, things like that. So, knowing that we've got this amount of skill points to spend, and we've got a certain character that we might want to try to build, we need to keep in mind what we can spend those points on. So just as an example, if you look at your skill list, we can see here that aircraft mechanic, you can increase that using military, background, or educational skill points. However, something like biology can only be increased using educational skill points. Combat rifleman can only be increased using military skill points. Reconnaissance can only be increased using military or background character points, or skill points, sorry. However, for recon, we can see that there's a little 1 there. Consulting the notes, we see that that skill costs double. So that's going to be important to remember, because for most characters, that would cost them 2 points per rank, but we get it for half, which is only 1. Okay, so we've got a bunch of skills that take military that we want to increase. So let's start with education and background. Looking at our list, I think if this guy is a special forces dude, he might be used to wandering around the countryside looking for spare parts and extra ammo and stuff like that. So we're going to take scrounging. Let's just start. We'll start off at 50. Now, scrounging is military or background. We're going to use some of our background points. So that's just 1 rank per skill level increase. So that would be 50 points, taking us down to 250. Now let's say we want to do combat rifleman. Let's take that to 50. That is an increase of 30 ranks, and that can only use military points, so that would be 30 points. However, our specialty gives us that for half, so we only spend 15 points. So that takes it to 265. Likewise, let's say recon, we want to go to 50. Now recon, we know we can spend military or background points on, but we already know it costs double. However, rather than it costing 2 points, oh wait, we already did that. Well, no, I'll continue to use this as an example. Because recon is so valuable, let's say we want to take that to 70. So, recon from 50 to 70, that's an increase of 20 levels. So that would cost 20 points. Well, no, it would cost 40 points because it is doubled. However, we get it for half cost, which is 1, which is only 20 points. However, because we're now increasing a skill above rank 50, that is doubled. So this does, in fact, go to 2 for us. So that's a 40-point spend, and we can do military or background. You know, we've got background, so let's take that down to 210. Now that's still very good, because for a normal character, that would have cost 4 times that amount. So that would have cost 80 character points, or skill points. I keep saying character points because I'm used to games that use that terminology. But that's essentially how we build characters through buying skills. One thing to keep in mind when you are increasing skills, in fact, I'll do it here. Let's take this up to 80, because 80 is the recommended limit for characters to start with in a skill. They recommend don't go any higher than 80. So a 50 to 80 increase, that's 30 ranks in the skill. So we get that for half because of our specialty. So that takes it to 15. But because it was above 50, that's doubled, so it goes to 30. And that's a military only. $235. Let's do, well, let's see here. We know we want to get, we'll do heavy weapons at 35. We'll just take that down to 200. Heavy weapons are things like, anti-tank missiles, shoulder-fired rockets, things like that. So I don't anticipate I'm going to run into a lot of those to be able to use, but if I do, it'd be nice to have them. Although, I made a mistake. Did you catch that? I took that to rank 35 and I subtracted 35 points. But I get that for half. So really, because we can't do 35 and half, let's just do 36. And that would be 18. So 235 minus 18. Well, actually, no, I would just add 18. So that is 2218. No, that's not right. Now I've confused myself. Now I can't do math. Of course, I can't. It doesn't help that I have terrible eyesight and I can't hardly see this number. 235 minus 36, that should have been 199. But it's halved, So we add 18. So yeah, 217. I was off by 1. There you go. Okay, so what else takes military? Well, let's just keep going here. Foraging. That takes military or background. But as you can see, there's a 3. Check our notes. That skill costs double if purchased as a background skill. So we've got more background points to use, I think. Again, my eyes. Now I've got slightly more military points to use. So, but it costs double if we buy it with background points. So even though we get it for half, it's going to cost us more points in the long run using it as a background skill. So we're going to increase it using military points. So we're going to get foraging to 50. So that would be 25 points out of military. And that takes us down to 192. All right, what else? Okay, we're good at body combat, so we know how to throw hands. So let's increase that to 50. That's an increase of 30, which would cost us 30 points, but we get it for half because of our specialty. So it only costs us 15 points. And body combat can be increased with military background or education. Let's take 15 out of our background. That brings us down to 195. Okay. Let's get 50 ranks in melee combat. So we're good with knives. Melee combat, that is a military-only skill. So we went up 30 ranks. So that's going to cost us 30 points. Takes us to 162. You know what? I want to make sure that I get recon to 80 before I start running out of points. So that's an increase of 10 ranks. That would be 10 points, but it's above 50, so it's doubled to 20, but recon costs twice, so that's 40. But I get it at half, which drops it back down to 20. 142. Okay. Another thing that I think he might want to take is pistol. So he knows how to shoot pistols pretty good. We're going to give that to him at 50. Now we find pistol. We see it is military only. Now your referee might house rule that you could also use background skill points to increase that. Like, for example, say you were a police officer or something before you joined the military, or you owned a target shooting pistol or something, and you know how to use it. So I could conceivably see allowing, civilians, I guess in certain nationalities, to have background points available to purchase pistols. But for now, we're just going to stick with rules as written. So it's going to cost us 50 points out of military to get that. So that would be 92. All right, what else do we think we might want? You know what? We had spent a lot of time discussing how dangerous it is to get hurt and knocked unconscious or critically injured. So let's take some medical skill, because that is always a nice skill to have, and you can help yourself or other characters with it. providing you're conscious, that is. But medical is military or education background points. So we haven't spent anything out of education yet. So let's drop 50 out of that, takes us down to 110. What else do we feel like this guy might be good at? Let's take chemistry. Maybe he's good at improvising bombs and explosives and stuff, or distilling fuel for vehicles, things like that. Chemistry is an education skill. We took that at 50. Leaves us with 60 points. What else? You know what? Let's take pistol to 70. So that's an increase of 20, but it's above 50, so that's actually 40. So we have 52 military points left. You know what? I think I want more scrounging so I can live off the land better if I fail my hunting rolls. So, scrounging, military or background. We've still got a bunch of background points left, so let's do that. Let's take scrounging to 80. This guy's a master scrounger. Of course, I did it again. Well, I'll stick with it. Okay, so scrounging. So that's a 30 rank increase. So it'd be 30 points, but it's over 50, so it's doubled. So that becomes 60 background points. So 135. What I had meant to do was increase my foraging. We'll take foraging to 80, why not? So that is again a 30 rank increase, so that should be 30 points, but it's above 50, so it's doubled, so it becomes 60 points. But we get it for half cost because of our specialty, so it really is only 30 points. And foraging is military or background, but it's a 3. It costs double for purchasing as a background skill. So instead of 30, it is going to be 60. So that is what? 6, that would be 75. Well, I'm pretty good at just about everything. Now, you don't have to spend all of your character points, but anything you don't spend is lost. So you really want to try to maximize your investment here. Spend everything you can. So let's take thrown weapon, for example. That's a military. So how good can we throw a knife? We'll bump that to 50. So that's an increase of 30. Takes that down to 22. We've already got recon at 80. Pistol. You know what? Let's take pistol to 75. So that's an increase of 5 ranks, but it's over 50, so it's doubled to 10. You know what? If I just do this to 80, it'll use all but 2. And then I can use those last 2 points because I get half in heavy weapons. That would actually be 4, so that takes that to 40. Okay, all my military points are spent. I've got 60 education left and 75 background. Actually, here's one we haven't done yet. Let's take a language. That can use anything, military background or education. The 6 is all characters pay half cost for any language in the same group as their native language. European players pay half cost for all Germanic, Romance, and Balto-Slavic languages. Now, we already know from before, we speak English. English is the only language in its language group, so we don't have to worry about the rest of that. But let's say we want to know Russian. Might be handy to know Russian as a special operator. And we can use education or background points on that. So let's use our background points. We've got 75 left. Let's just drain those. We speak Russian at 75 ranks. So pretty fluently, but not like a native speaker. That leaves us with 50 education. So you know what? Let's, how much can we get into our mid? So if we increase that by, I think, well, yeah, that'd be 25. So if we take that to 75, that is a 25 rank increase. It's over 50, so 25 doubled is 50, and we drain that. Okay, so we have now spent all of our skill points, and we've chosen all of our skills. So these things would just transfer directly over to your character sheet. Next, we figure out our body combat damage, and that is found by probably one of the most complex formulas. So I'll do it on the calculator here. So we take our strength, which is 11, plus our stature, which is 10. That's 21. We multiply that times our body combat rating, which is 50. That's 1,050. We divide that by 200, and that comes to 5.25. But we round that down to 5 because the line is under the formula. What that means is every time this dude punches somebody, he can do 1d6 plus 5 damage. All right. Our base hit numbers. We did not take any skill in large caliber gun, so we don't fire artillery pieces. And we don't have any skill in hunting bows, so we don't know bow and arrow very well. But we do have combat rifleman, pistol, and heavy weapons. So the way these are found is you find your skill. That's 80, and 80 for pistol, and heavy weapons is 40. So that'll be easy. We just figure, so combat rifleman is 80 times 0.6. Actually, here, I'll turn on my calculator so I can do this. Okay. 80 times 0.6. Oops. That is 48. And we also know that's going to be 48. Heavy weapons is half, so it's going to be 24. Medium is half of that, so this is going to be 24, 24, 12. And long distance is 1/10 of the skill, so that's going to be 80, which is 8, 8, and 4. And that just leaves our equipment purchase allowance. So we take 500 times our time, which is 17. We have $8,500 worth of equipment to purchase. Now, this isn't actually cash. It's just a number that represents how much value's worth of equipment you could have accrued over the course of your military career up to the starting point of the campaign. And you can take 10% of that as gold coins to use later for bartering and whatnot. But yeah, that is character creation in Twilight 2000 First Edition. Hopefully that made sense. We'll catch you later.